There comes a day when you stop waiting. Waiting for the call that never comes. Waiting for the apology that was never offered. Waiting for the love that always seemed just out of reach. There comes a day when the begging ends and your life begins. When you stop asking people to see your worth. When you stop handing out explanations to ears that were never listening. And on that day, something shifts, quietly, without ceremony, without applause. It is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is the stillness of a soul that finally decides, enough. Enough of shrinking, enough of waiting, enough of bleeding to be chosen. And in that moment, you choose yourself, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of love. A love that says, I will no longer abandon me. The day you finally choose yourself is the day everything begins to change. There is a kind of heartbreak most people never name. It doesn't happen when someone leaves you. It doesn't happen in the slammed doors or the silence after an argument. It happens slowly, quietly. It happens in the small betrayals of yourself, the moments you don't even notice. It happens when you begin to leave you. I once knew a woman who spent years waiting. The blue glow of her phone lit her face at 2:13 a.m. Unread receipts staring back at her. That hollow drop in her stomach every time the screen lit up. And it wasn't him. She waited for his text. She waited for his apology. She waited for the day he would finally see her worth. And in all that waiting, she forgot how to choose herself. She poured every ounce of energy into being enough for someone else, until she no longer felt enough for her own reflection. That is the true weight of waiting. Not the absence of their love, but the absence of your own. Not that they didn't choose you, but that in trying to be enough for them, you stopped being enough for yourself. And isn't that what so many of us do? We silence our gut instinct just to keep the peace. We bite our tongue because we're afraid they'll leave if we speak the truth. We accept behavior that leaves us aching because asking for more feels like risking everything. But here is the truth. That is not love. That is self-abandonment. It is the kind of heartbreak that leaves scars no one else can see. You want so badly to be chosen, to be seen, to be loved, that you begin to make compromises. Tiny ones at first. You lower your standards by inches. You justify words that don't match actions. You stay when every part of you knows it's time to go. And with each small betrayal of your own heart, you drift further and further from the person you once were. You can do that for a while, but not forever. Because one day you wake up exhausted. Not because of them, but because you've been carrying the weight of proving you are enough. When deep down you stop being enough for you. That is the quiet heartbreak. The invisible one. The heartbreak of abandoning yourself. And every time you do, you teach the world how to treat you. You set the tone for what you will tolerate. You send the message, without even knowing it, that your voice, your needs, your heart do not matter as much as someone else's presence. But here is the lesson. You cannot keep choosing them without breaking something inside yourself. There is a difference between loving someone and losing yourself to them. Real love will never require you to dim your light, to swallow your pain. The cruelest heartbreak is not that they left. It is that you stayed. After every part of you already knew this was not love. At some point, you wake up and realize you've been performing more than living. Performing in love, performing in friendships, even performing in your own skin. I once knew a man who spent his life trying to be chosen. He worked longer hours than anyone else. He bent his back to carry the weight of everyone's expectations. One night, his daughter stood on stage, scanning the crowd for his face. But the seat was empty. And at the dinner table that same week, his chair was still cold. And yet at night, when the lights were off, he lay awake asking himself one question. Was I finally enough today? But here's the tragedy. The harder he tried to prove his worth, the more disconnected he became from it. He became a rumor to himself. Because worth is not something you earn, it is something you remember. So many of us live this way. We think, if I can just love them better, be more patient, more forgiving, more easy to deal with, maybe then they'll stay. Maybe then I'll finally feel secure. But when love depends on proof, it is not love. It is a performance. And performances are exhausting. The more you prove yourself, the smaller you become. You water down your voice so they won't call you difficult. You ignore your needs so they won't call you needy. You silence your truth so they won't call you dramatic. Until one day, you don't even recognize the person you've become. And here is the quiet wisdom. The moment you stop proving yourself is the moment you begin to become yourself. You no longer filter every word out of fear of being misunderstood. You no longer bend yourself into shapes just to be tolerated. You no longer disappear in order to stay. Because when you stop performing, you finally start living. And the people who remain, they are the ones who never needed the performance in the first place. There comes a time when you realize that every explanation you've ever given was a rope, and every time you handed it out, someone pulled. I once knew a woman who lived her life in explanations. Every no came with a 10-minute story. Every boundary was softened with apologies. Every choice was dressed up so no one could call her selfish. And still, they misunderstood her. Still, they judged her. Still, they twisted her words until she doubted herself. One day she grew tired. Not tired of people, but tired of begging to be understood. And in that moment, she cut the rope. She realized the right ones never needed the footnotes. They understood her without the essays. So she stopped explaining. She stopped pleading her case like she was on trial for her own existence. She let her silence do what her words never could. And do you know what happened? The ones who had always needed her explanations drifted away. But the ones who truly saw her remained. That's the freedom of not explaining. It is not distance. It is not coldness. It is the quiet strength of saying, I am enough, even if you don't understand me. Explanations can be cages, and silence can be liberation. Because when you stop handing out the rope, you discover who was really listening all along. Life forces you to see it. Being approved of is not the same as being whole. Approval is fragile. It changes with moods, with trends, with expectations. One day you are adored, the next, forgotten. Applause changes with the weather. Wholeness doesn't check the forecast. Wholeness is different. Wholeness doesn't ask permission to exist. It doesn't wait for applause. It doesn't rise and fall with someone else's opinion. It is steady, quiet, rooted. And yet, so many of us trade wholeness for approval. We edit our voices, we compromise our values, we shrink our dreams, just to be chosen. But here is the truth. The approval you chase today can be gone tomorrow. But the self you choose today will remain. Sometimes it takes only one moment to prove it. There was a man who spent years trying to please everyone in his family. He said yes when his heart said no. He bent until he nearly broke. Birthdays missed, empty chairs at dinners, his own life put on hold. And then one day, he finally refused. Just one word, no. And for the first time, he felt whole. Not because they agreed, not because they understood, but because he finally chose himself. That is the strength of wholeness over approval. The waiting doesn't last forever. It ends when you stop begging for love, when you stop bleeding for attention, when you stop handing your worth to people who wouldn't know what to do with it if they held it. And on that day,
you choose yourself. Not out of anger, out of survival, out of clarity, out of the deep knowing that losing them is nothing compared to losing you.
Understand this. If you keep abandoning yourself just to keep someone else, you will die with their name on your lips and your own soul left starving. That is not love. That is self-destruction dressed up as devotion. Stop calling it loyalty when it is chains. Stop calling it love when it is self-erasure. Stop calling it sacrifice when it is self-burial. Because you will also find something greater. Your own damn life. Your silence will grow loud. Your presence will grow heavy. Your peace will become your protest. And when they realize they can no longer feed on your doubt, they will call it change. It isn't change, it is resurrection. So choose yourself every day, every room, every love, because the harsh truth is this: if you don't choose yourself, you'll die waiting for someone who never will. If you don't choose yourself, you'll die waiting for someone who never will.